Okay, I see Allison has connected now, so I'll just quickly go over our introduction. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube and recorded. We have regrets this evening from Councillor Boehm and from the chair, Jose Conway. In attendance for city staff tonight are myself, Derek O'Shea, the committee clerk. We have Craig Desjardins, the director of the Office of Strategy, Innovation and Partnerships. I hope I got that correct. We also have Julia McCautry-Jansman, who is our meeting host. And also Donna Gillespie, the CEO of KEDCO, is here as well and will be providing a delegation. And there are currently no public members in attendance. And with that, I will turn the meeting over to our vice chair, Councillor Oosterhoff.
Yes, good evening, everyone, and thanks for being here. I've been looking forward to this meeting. And so, Mr. Clerk, do we have quorum? You said that, right? We have quorum?
Yes, we do. We do have quorum, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, then we'll bring the meeting to order. And the first thing is the confirmation of minutes. Do I have someone?
I'll interject quickly, Mr. Vice Chair. We actually, first item is approval of the agenda.
Oh, yeah.
Confirmation of minutes.
Thank you. You'll have to correct me a few times here. I'm only
no problem. That's what I'm here for.
Approval of the agenda. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the agenda? Okay, yes, John, thanks. How are you? And seconder? I can't, oh, I'm gonna have to go, sorry, I'm gonna change the screen for me here.
You change to the grid view. I believe Charlie had his hand up there, so we'll give you a second to change over to the grid view.
Thank you. Okay, that's gonna be better. And now I can see everybody. Hello, everyone. All right. All right, yes, so great, we have that. All in favor of the agenda? Thank you. All right, and that passes. All right, now for confirmation of the minutes, do I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes? Yes, John, and yes, sorry, Charlie, gotcha, yeah. Great, and so we have our minutes. Any disclosure of
Mr. Chair, we just need a quick vote on that to confirm that everybody's in favor.
Okay, all in favor of the minutes. Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. And we move on to disclosure of pecuniary interest. And seeing none. So we move over to delegations, and we have this evening Donna Gillespie, CEO of Kingston Economic Development Corporation, who will present to speak to the committee with respect to the Food Venture Program. Hello, Donna.
Hello, Councillor Oosterhoff. Hello, committee. Thank you so much for inviting me here this evening to talk about the Food Venture Program. Kingston Economic Development Corporation hosted 3 food venture programs in the first quarter of this year as part of our ongoing COVID-19 response and recovery programming. It's also very closely linked, the concept of supporting
Hi, Donna. Unfortunately, we are
to our integrated economic development strategic plan that we launched.
So Donna, we are losing your feed a bit, so I might recommend that you turn off your video. I'm going to stop your video for you. And we'll just give a second for that to catch up.
I'm sorry, Clerk Derek. Is there a problem?
Yeah, you were just cutting in and out, so I turned your video off. So we'll go try and go without the video, and then if we have further connectivity problems, maybe we'll just ask you to call in. But we'll take it from here. So we got up to mentioning that you had done 3 programs as part of in Q1 as part of the Food Venture Program, and then we kind of lost you after that.
Okay, I'll try it again. Otherwise, I will call in. So we launched 3 programs at the beginning of the year, and these align well with our COVID-19 response and recovery plans, as well as with our new integrated economic development strategy, which we launched with the city in January. Foodpreneur, food tourism, supporting local food chains also connects closely with the new rural economy plan, which Mr. Desjardins will speak to, as well as the city's climate leadership strategies. It also ties closely with Tourism Kingston's integrated destination strategy. So very well suited for this community. And the 3 programs we launched were a 12-week food venture boot camp, which had 21 participants. And it looked at everything from initial concept and idea for starting a food enterprise through to value proposition and business planning, packaging, health and safety requirements, to sales and food service. This culminated in a pitch competition where participants could buy for up to $5,000 in startup funding, which was provided by the province. The second component was a 5-week restaurant pivot to consumer packaged goods program. And this was at capacity with 20 participants as well. And this was geared at restaurants, catering companies, also to farmers who would be selling in farmers markets, to look at ways to take recipes, take their product or recipe and then turn it into a retail ready consumer packaged good. So this was quite popular, and we saw a number of success stories like Skipper's Catering, which has pivoted into Pizza in a Box, which is a phenomenal local pizza in a box food delivery service. If you haven't tried it, highly recommend it. Also Real Food Micro Farm, which is out of Gananoque and looking at other spaces closer to Kingston and the products that they sell being available in a retail sales format. And the third program that we offered was a tourism recovery initiative. And it was really tying into looking at telling the story from a culinary tourism perspective. And it was a 5-week program with 7 participants. And it focused a lot on branding, social media, tourism trends, food science and recipe development, and a little bit of overlap with the food retail, and also looking at how restaurateurs can use their facility, which at the time earlier this year opened for in-room dining, to be able to look at sort of the grab and go concept of prepackaged goods. So we're quite pleased with those programs. And in terms of next steps, we are looking at hosting half-day sessions for an introduction to starting a food business. And again, this can be someone looking at being a foodpreneur, entering into catering or a restaurant food setting, but also for those looking at smaller scale manufacturing of food product. And I think there's been a strong trend for keeping food supply close and investing and supporting local food producers. So we see this as being an exciting next step for this initiative. And based on feedback from participants this year, there's quite an interest in organizing networking sessions and a formal schedule where foodpreneurs, small-scale food processors can regularly convene to talk about challenges or opportunities or trends they're seeing. So that is something we're going to get underway before the end of the year. I would be happy to field any questions from the committee.
Okay. Thank you, Donna, for that presentation. That makes us hungry. That's a great thing. I just Googled as you're talking, pizza in a box. I'm not sure, I had not heard of that, and that's definitely something we're going to try very soon here. So that's great. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Donna, you mentioned you had the 3 programs: food entrepreneur, food tourism, and I just missed the third one early on in your presentation. What was the third one? Food entrepreneur, tourism.
Oh, and there was a restaurant pivot to consumer packaged goods.
Restaurant pivot, okay, to consumer. So some of these, Donna, are quite successful already. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Correct. So we have emerging businesses such as Pizza in a Box or Taco the Town, Real Food Micro Farm. But there have also been some more established businesses that took part, such as Mio Gelato, the Holiday Country Manor Inn, Haymakers Coffee on Wolf Island, Grocery Basket. So there's an interest from even those who are established.
Yes.
Who are looking resources to support them as they pivot or have their business continue to evolve.
Yeah, certainly. As I look at it, and my view as a counselor too, and I really would love to stimulate some conversation from the committee on this. It just resonates as a really great thing to be doing, and food venture. It just harmonizes very well with rural life. Our agriculture and eating, and just and the contribution we can make from the rural area, and we can welcome this. So I'm really pleased by it, and I'm been so busy with so many other things that I think I'm only just starting to align with it. And so I'd love to hear what other on the panel, any thoughts and accolades or concerns at all. Where are we at? Anyone at all? Yes, Charles. Oh, your mic on mute still. How's that? Try again. Yep, there you
Can you hear
are.
me now? So these programs, so did you bring the speakers in from outside, Donna, to talk to these people that had success with this in other areas, or what were the meetings about?
So there is a firm, through you, Mr. Chair, there is a firm that specializes in food venture programs. So these are consultants that have been working across Ontario through the network of Ontario Small Business Centres, of which the Economic Development Office does house one. And it was great bringing in these consultants because they have a wide range of connections within the food industry and helping new entrepreneurs start up or scale. So each session or each program would have had different workshops and classes, be it a 5-week or a 12-week program. But some examples would be circularity in sustainability and food production, looking at branding, social media and food trends, food science and recipe development, food product sales for food service or retail, guidelines for packaging and nutrition labeling would be examples of those in the tourism recovery program specifically. For the week initial food venture boot camp, which is launching your food business, it covers value proposition and business plan, idea feasibility and food trends, mentoring, guidelines for food packaging and labeling, sanitation and food safety training. So really each of the sessions was geared for where the entrepreneur would be in their journey.
Thank you.
That's great. Yeah. Anything else, Charlie? Yeah.
Well, that's all I can think of right now.
That's great.
I find it very interesting that we're going this way, and it seems to be a rocky road to success. Because when I pick up most of the magazines, I assume all this stuff is going on all the time when you read the farm magazines, but not necessarily the case.
Donna, Charlie mentioned, I just want to interject there, are there municipalities, what other municipalities do we know are engaged in this? And did you mention Kitchener? There's obviously more rural areas looking at this.
Most certainly, and that's a trend I believe all of Ontario is trying to jump on, is keeping food supply chains closer. And we have had great successes in the Kingston area, such as Urban Hippie Granola. We were able to include them in some of our Ontario East food trade show delegations, where they've been so successful, they've been able to enter into major grocery chains like Metro or Farm Boy. That really stand out in terms of food and food science and supporting the foodpreneur would be Ottawa Valley, has a number of great examples. Merrickville's been very successful with a few. Guelph being in a farming area, Oxford County, again, Southern Ontario, you see quite a few because of the farming and the agricultural assets that are in the area.
Absolutely. Are we partnering with the neighboring municipalities too, like South Frontenac, and are we involved in with some of their economic development?
Yes, so the Kingston Economic Development Corporation partners closely with Frontenac County. Richard Allen has been wonderful in sharing our opportunities to his businesses. We also work closely with Ann Pritchard and Frontenac Business Services, and they themselves have been hosting numerous programs on food packaging guidelines, labeling, and again, it creates this great synergy where we can share with Kingston-based businesses and vice versa.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I'm really pleased by those partnerships. And I see Allison, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you. So a couple of questions with respect to, I guess, accessing capital, because that's a big thing. Somebody's starting a business. Neighboring us, Central Frontenac Community Futures Development Corporation, they've been able to support a lot of businesses in that geographical jurisdiction, small farms getting started, with cash, with programming. Is that what this particular program is going to do for the farmers in rural Kingston, which is a completely different geographical designation? Is it kind of similar? Just because in supplement to that, I kind of want to know, how do people find out about this? Who is the point person with KEDCO? How do you get more information to access this if this is indeed an ongoing program that needs to be supported? Thanks.
Thank you,
Yep.
Councillor Oosterhoff. With regards to access to capital, this is really a resource and a training workshop, as well as opportunities to make connections within the industry. I did mention that at the end of the 12-week Food Venture Bootcamp, participants could enter into a pitch competition to buy up to $5,000 in startup capital. And that was merged with an existing program our office offers called Starter Company Plus. The funding or accessing capital you referenced through the Community Futures Development Corporation, such as Frontenac Business Services, really is limited to those defined in a rural area, which very sadly, and in my mind it should not, but it does not include the City of Kingston businesses or those in countryside or rural districts. So any of the participants who were from outside of the City of Kingston boundaries could, if they wanted, access CFDC funding for their ventures. Where our office could come in is helping connect to more traditional lending opportunities, BDC, the banks. But I think that's a whole separate topic to be explored, is ensuring that rural Kingston can qualify for CFDC funding. For a point person, within our office, Norman Musingamona is our manager of startups and small business. If you're on our website, kingstonecdev.com, there are links in an online form, and really we'd encourage any of your rural constituents to reach out to anyone on the team, and we are happy to walk them through the process.
Just to be clear on Allison, so that's, I know that since been a councillor, that's been an issue, and we have been trying to find out why the city is, the rural area of our city can't access those funds, right, Allison? I think we've talked about that before. And has there been any movement on that, Donna? And if it's not available through the Frontenac Business Services, or where there is funding available through economic development, or not?
Through you, I have not had an update in terms of the boundary discussion related to community future development operations and designating rural Kingston within those. So Mr. Desjardins might have more up-to-date information on those discussions. But in terms of access to capital, any individual in Kingston or the surrounding areas can work with our small business advisors to look at how to access capital through traditional means, being BDC, the local banks or credit unions. But this is
right.
a direct funding program.
Yes. Yeah, it's always bothered me, certainly as a council, it's always bothered me as a small businessman, how how we are somehow an island here, just cannot do that. I have heard from others, and it's just It's unfortunate for our rural area. But Allison, go ahead. What else do you have?
No, I think that was it. It's clarified, and thank you very much for answering the questions through the chair, Donna. It's clear, and it's unfortunate, and I'm not sure when this is going to get changed, but it'll be interesting as to how this does a segue into Mr. Desjardins' presentation. If it's so important, then let's just see how important it really is. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, yes, and I don't know if Craig wants to mention it. I saw your hand there. Sorry, Craig. Do you want to just wait till your presentation, or?
I was going to jump in and mention that, Mr. Chair, is that technically city staff can't speak to a delegation, but I know Craig will be covering this in his briefing and report. I know he's eager to get at it, but I see Mr. Wernham has his hand up.
Okay, sorry about that, John. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And Derek, I might have a question on a point of procedure for you in a couple of minutes. So to echo Allison's comments, I find it as a new farmer very frustrating to listen to talk of seeking financial resources through traditional lending centers, because they don't exist. To get money as a new farmer to get into food production, you are running up against a brick wall the entire way. There needs to be something unconventional, non-traditional, which is where the Community Futures Development Corporations, or from what I'm gathering here, it's now called the Frontenac Business Development Office, or whatever it is, something that picks people up when the banks say, yeah, take a hike. So I get concerned when we have strategies, and Derek, please reflect this in the minutes. I get concerned when we have strategies that talk about hiring new positions and establishing new offices, because I see that as consumption of capital, often public funds, that could be very easily used in the thousands of dollars that it accumulates as some sort of grant directly from the city of Kingston. We know the need is out there. We have it in our strategies. The issue is money. And we need to stop spending the money on people telling us we need money and get the money to the people who can use the money. Now I have a question about a motion. Derek, maybe you can help me with this, because I suspect we'll actually have to defer to the next Rural Advisory Committee meeting. So I move that and other people please feel free to weigh in with the wording. I move that the Rural Advisory Committee recommends to City of Kingston Council that the province of Ontario and the federal government of Canada redraw the CFTC boundaries to incorporate the rural zone of Kingston. I know those entities exist as a partnership between the province and the feds, so we need to just grind it through some MP. And now that the Liberals are back in, maybe Mr. Gerritsen can help us. I suspect that's probably one level it needs to go to. So that is my motion. Can we vote on it, or do we got to set it up for the next meeting? And do I have to type it up?
So technically you cannot pass motions during the delegation portion. I think probably the best way, John, if you do want to do something like this, would be to get it sort of spelt out directly, and maybe some consultation with staff on how to word it, because wording is really important on these things, and can see it go on a future agenda. What you'd like to do if you want to make your sort of intentions known for this meeting and get it on the record is you can mention it under notices of motion that, you know, you will be bringing a motion to this effect at a future meeting.
Perfect.
So we can save that for that portion of the meeting.
Yep, I'll probably be good with the words. I'm an expert at words.
That's great, John. I think that's a good thing that we can do as an advisory, and let's take it from there and let's follow it through. That's great. Thank you to the clerk for that clarification. So as far as this delegation goes, are there any more questions for Donna? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on from Donna. Thank you so much for being here and for the work that you're doing, and hopefully this will spur on more conversation and discussion and opportunities for the rural area. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we'll move on there to our briefing, our main briefing of the evening. and with Craig Desjardins, Director, Office of Strategy, Innovation and Partnerships, is here to speak to us regarding the Rural Economic Development Strategy. Welcome, Craig.
Well, thank you very much, Acting Chair Surhoff. It's a pleasure to be here, members of the committee. Maybe before I jump into my slides, and I've sort of kept it brief, so I obviously would prefer to have input from members of the REC. I'll just make a few comments just about the CFTC boundary issue. And one of the things you probably don't know is that before joining the City of Kingston 5 years ago, I was an executive director of a CFTC in Prince Edward and Lennox and Addington. So I'm very familiar with the critical role of the CFTCs in providing access to capital to those that the banks turn down. Banks can be brutal. And I would share, and perhaps as a next step to the next meeting, we have been working, there is a report to appeal to the federal government to extend the boundary of Frontenac CFTC into rural Kingston. I could certainly prepare some slides, highlights of that report. I think it's a very compelling, like it's absolutely ridiculous that one side of Highway 38 is for a business on that side of the road, you can get a grant and loan, and on the other side that's in Kingston, you can't. It doesn't make any sense. Part of the challenge, though, is that we're not the only sort of semi-urban or I guess community that has rural but also urban, and I think part of the issue for the federal government is that if they do it for us, they'd have to do it for several other areas. But that really isn't, I don't think, a reasonable justification. The reality is about service, equal and fair access to service across our country. And I think we can, as I said, present some details, and certainly would welcome the motion that John has sort of roughed out, and happy to work with him on that language. It's interesting. One of the roles that we've envisioned of the new person we're bringing on, the new rural economic development officer, is really advocacy, and it's advocacy in many respects. And I'll reference the slides in a second, but it's not just the CFDC program, it's also the Rural Economic Development Program. That's a provincial program. It's called the RED program. And it's a program that is usually accessible to municipal governments. But every time we apply, we get immediately told that we're not eligible. Even though these programs are completely about serving rural Kingston, addressing challenges, we're told that no, we're not a rural community. So and we have lots of stats to prove that we are a rural community. So again, happy to come back at the next meeting, and would really value that motion to add some force to our argument. And I agree, Mr. Gerritsen would be an excellent advocate, I think, for us to seek that change. So maybe, Mr. Chairman, what I'll do is I'll ask staff to bring up the slides, and I'll just quickly walk through some content, and again have an opportunity for question and answer. The slides I've put together just regarding the new rural economic development strategy, the committee will remember in the fall of last year, I think it was late November, we came, or maybe it was the second of December, we came to the committee and provided sort of an opportunity for input on sort of the last version of the strategy. Obviously, with COVID, it's been a challenging time, and we are advancing. Council did accept and approve the Kingston Rural Economic Development Strategy. And fortunately, they have provided resources to actually implement a number of those recommendations. I appreciate John's comment about making sure we get money to those in need. We do have some limitations about bonusing businesses directly with grants, but we can certainly explore how we can get more money into the hands of those who need it. So next slide. We'll get right into the presentation. So as I've stated here, the strategy has been approved. It is a intricate and important component of the new integrated economic development strategy. And Donna referenced that in her presentation. It is a council strategic priority, and something that Councillor Oosterhoff and Councillor Bohm always are very vocal at council about the priority that rural Kingston needs to be strong and resilient. and it has to be part of the City of Kingston's economic health. Next slide. I thought I'd provide just again, I think you've seen this before, just a couple of highlights in terms of the demographics of rural Kingston. You live in rural Kingston, so you know. But again, these are some, I think, surprising to some. You know, the population in rural Kingston is rising sharply. You're seeing a lot of immigration. The average age is quite a bit older than urban Kingston. Rural Kingston has an overall higher income level by a fair amount than urban Kingston. I got a bit of a typo on the next one on housing. The value of dwellings is higher in rural Kingston, not higher than. It's quite a bit higher than the average in urban Kingston, which again is very interesting. Also of interest is that the education levels in rural Kingston are quite a bit higher on average than in urban Kingston, which may or may not be surprising. And lastly, probably is not surprising to many on this committee, but due to the large farming sector and the entrepreneurial self-employment, rural Kingston has a much higher level of entrepreneurship and self-employment, which is again a great asset to the region. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the strategy. Again, as we created the strategy, as we received input, both in surveys and interviews, many with you as well, the purpose was really to create an intentional development across rural Kingston that will leverage assets, industries, sectors, and opportunities. The goal is to position us for both short and long-term sustainable economic development. And that's, again, it's easier said than done. It's a lot of work, but we've got a great plan. The next slide. The strategy is consisting of sort of two major components. One is sort of development opportunities, and the second one are what we call enablers. And the development opportunities really divided into agriculture opportunities, tourism, hamlet-led development, and then rural cluster development. On the enabler side, you've got project selection and approval processes, review of funding envelopes, again, critical, and then identifying alternative service options. And included within that would be something like broadband, which is, again, has been and continues to be one of the number one issues that we hear continually. I'm sure Councillor Osterhoff can attest to that as an enabler for economic prosperity in rural Kingston. And I've got some comments to make on that later. Next slide, please. So the metrics for success, this is early suggestions, and again, you will help us measure the success of the work that we do. But certainly some suggestions include the number of new startup businesses, offers for new business expansion potential, attraction of investment, both in dollars in private sector investment, but also potentially funds we leverage and attract in grant dollars. Expanding opportunities for research and development innovation in different aspects of the sectors, and that could be in construction sector, it could be in agriculture. Support of newcomers and immigrant entrepreneurs, understanding how newcomers to our community might be connected into opportunities for employment. One of the things we hear and see in the data and talking to our rural sectors is a challenge of labor on farms, aging farmers, and the need for more talent. How do we connect newcomers to opportunities in farming? Strengthening community engagement. One of the key messages I will try and reiterate throughout my presentation is that this is your plan, our plan, and it needs continual participation from people in rural Kingston. I'm going to be suggesting some structures and some working groups, and we need more people involved because we need their support and engagement to ensure success of the plan. And finally, leveraging and building infrastructure and assets. And then again, that part of that is broadband 100%, but it could be other infrastructure and assets as the group defines. Next slide, please. So recommendations and rationale. Next slide. Maybe I won't go into such huge detail because I'll probably drag on a little longer than I should. But again, what we've done is we've got 15 recommendations within the strategy and the rationale for those based on the data we collected, input, and the focus groups. Again, lots of opportunity as it relates to agriculture. You know that, you're farmers. You don't need me telling you that. But again, how do we provide additional access to innovation, access to capital, pools, encourage local food consumption? Donna's collaboration and programs is an exact example of what we would be looking to do. And how do we attract new farmers? One of the things that the farming community has done well has looked at issues like succession. It's interesting, they've done so well with some of the programs, with succession, both from an accounting, but also a legal perspective. It's the kind of thing that we may look at. I know the trade sector is another sector that's dealing with an aging demographic, and really could you probably use some of that succession planning support. But again, how do we augment that and support that? Next slide. Tourism, and again, the opportunities for agritourism, the opportunities to animate tourism opportunities. We've had initial discussions with our partners at Tourism Kingston, who are just chomping at the bit to get involved. They see incredible opportunities there. They're bringing people to Kingston, and they're looking to find things for them to do and to be exposed to. Obviously, Kingston Pen, these kind of tourist attractions are wonderful, but rural Kingston is also wonderful. And how do we create trails and opportunities for people to enjoy what we have in our rural community? Next slide, please. Rural clusters, again, looking at encouraging industry-focused rural clusters. One of the ones that we are interested in is understanding how we can better augment rural healthcare, and is that a rural healthcare center, and service, access to family physicians. Family physicians is a huge challenge throughout Ontario. It's a problem really throughout North America, and it's not going to get better with the demographics of doctors. They're aging rapidly, and there's more and more retirements. The city's working on recruitment strategies, and we'll be launching, coming to council in the coming months with a plan. But again, how do we serve the specific needs of rural healthcare? Next slide. Again, enablers, broadband with a capital B. Just an absolutely critical priority. Certainly in terms of an update, the city's been working very hardly with our partners at Utilities Kingston to access some grant funding. Sadly, we were unsuccessful in applications relating to both the Universal Broadband Fund and the ICON program. One's a federal and one's a provincial program. We are very keen to understand the provincial government's new program that's sort of been announced but hasn't been released, which has a significant amount of money connected to it, and is committed to providing resources to ensure that all of rural Ontario gets access to broadband. What's interesting is they seem to be going to a sort of territory type of approach where there's almost like a reverse auction type of a process where bidders, and those are likely some of the big players in the telecom world, who would provide the best service for the lowest price. So we're very, very keen to understand how this will work. I think Kingston is well positioned because Kingston includes the urban part as well as the rural. So I think some providers might be especially interested. Utilities Kingston, in the meantime, has actually gone out for a request for proposal for broadband service in rural Kingston. That closed in early September. I believe there were 6 submissions, 2 of which are they're in discussions with the consortiums and proceeding to sort of understand how that will fit with this new funding program being delivered by the province. So certainly lots of progress and a major focus of my office and Utilities Kingston's time. Next slide. Hamlet, the development, this will likely be a priority for sort of the mid-range, 12 to 24 months, but really understanding and developing Hamlet-based development opportunities, encouraging concentrated residential development. We'll be working heavily with the planning departments of the city as we work on this particular priority. Next slide. We'll get on to the implementation. I'll tell you sort of what we're planning on if we have the next slide. So in the very short term, the immediate term for the next 12 months, we've got a number of key priorities. The first one, logistics and internal mechanics. So we have posted, and did close yesterday. So we'll be interviewing and hiring within the next 6 weeks a new manager of rural and community development. And really excited to have someone who will be solely responsible and be working 100% to drive the rural file forward. We're sourcing and applying for grant funding that aligns with the strategy. We're working right now on a grant application with a number of partners, including maybe a surprising one, Corrections Canada, to look at how do we help with farm skills. And we're looking at a partnership with Corrections Canada with their property. They're interested from some of their residents are looking to upskill and sort of a collaboration with St. Lawrence College and others. But again, how do we meet the needs of the community? Develop strategy themed working groups and public participation. This is really based on the success of the implementation we've done with the workforce development and migration strategy. What was key in that strategy implementation, and it's still ongoing, is to reach out to those in the community that have a stake in that strategy, and actually engage them and ask them to participate. And so active participation, regular input has really been the key to the success of that entire project. Staff's responsibility is to provide support, both logistics in terms of meetings, to source funding for the projects that the volunteers help develop, and then find organizations to actually implement and execute. The goal of our office is not to create an empire. It's very much to find other organizations with capacity to deliver what is created by these themed working groups. And again, we can certainly chat about what those themed working groups might be. I think broadband would be one I would love to have very much sooner than later. But certainly agritourism or a farming working group would be great to have, and really understand and have their input on what programs we develop, and have staff start to work on that. Partnership and collaborations. Certainly, my office works very closely with Donna and her team on a regular basis, and certainly we're meeting with neighboring municipalities on a regular basis on a number of topics. But again, there's so much opportunity for collaboration. There's work underway right now exploring some solutions to rural transit. In partnership with some neighboring municipalities, and there's some funding opportunities that we found that might be able to allow us to look at a pilot. So again, it's so critical that we have our neighboring municipalities involved and as co-applicants in many of these funding programs. We've been meeting, as I said earlier, with Tourism Kingston and Kingston Economic Development to make sure everything is aligned and amplified. The idea here is not to duplicate what others are doing. It's to complement and to build on. And we've had success with that in many ways already, including a lot of the work we're doing around health innovation. And again, we work well, we work closely together, and many hands make light work. And lastly, again, community outreach and engagement. It's all about to beginning the market validation of the strategy. Are there pieces to the strategy that maybe aren't relevant anymore, or maybe there's new issues? Certain COVID and the pandemic have altered many of our lives, many of our strategies, and how do we adapt, and how are we nimble in changing and adapting? Next slide, please. Into the longer term, and again, maybe I won't go into too much detail, but again, This addresses issues as it relates to working with the planning department to develop criteria and scorecards to assist in shortlisting development opportunities in rural Kingston. How do we benchmark our performance? Again, I'm a numbers person. I love measuring things. I love reporting on, I love gathering data. How do we measure our success? Because again, part of our responsibility is report back to council on the progress of our work. And then certainly, again, in partnership with the city planning department, how do we develop land use strategies to support growth in sectors that are a priority to rural Kingston, agriculture and tourism and others. And I think that's it. I've talked for too long already. I think there's some other content in my presentation or my report, but I tried not to duplicate too much. I probably still did. But happy now to certainly open it up to questions and provide any other information that you're interested in. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Craig. That was excellent. There's so much there that we could probably go for a while. I have 2 pages of questions, but I'm going to open it to the committee first, and hopefully we can have some good conversation here. And I think there is a lot of questions, Craig, a lot of just angles to look at this. So this is great that you're here, and a great opportunity to engage together, to begin the engagement. So
100%.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions now, or do you want me to start off to stir the pot a little bit? Oh, what do we got here? Charlie? Oh, John, go ahead.
Are we sure we didn't have Charlie first?
I didn't see his hand. I thought I did.
Okay.
Did you remove it, Charlie, or did I miss that?
Okay, he's on mute. Here I go.
You're on mute, Charlie. So go ahead, John.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you, Craig. That was a very interesting report. And believe it or not, since I'm have the education and aptitude to read really fast, I have read through all of it. I think it reads pretty well.
There's a lot of reading.
I've had more. So I like how it flows, but I do worry that there is a bit of the loss of what I called in the military, well, not what I called it, was the military doctrinal thing, was the selection and maintenance of the aim. It's noted in the report that this might run up against Kingston's other strategies, particularly as the official plan gets reviewed, ongoing right now, and to kick off 2023, 2024. So I'm concerned that there is some internal contradiction where we've got the first one, support new farmers, and it's on page 10. We talk about encouraging new farmers, overcoming their barriers to access. But then on page 39, we've got about encouraging the rural business clusters, which might require rezoning of agricultural land. And if I was a new farmer reading that on a strategic document that city council has adopted, I would say, that's not good for my long-term farm health, because the city itself is interested in probably running up other developments up to the boundaries of my farm, which will probably impact my ability to carry on farming. And I'll use the example of beekeeping. This area in Kingston is pretty good for beekeeping because we don't have that much cash cropping as compared to Southwestern Ontario. But the Bees Act requires that there's be considerable standoff between active beehives and residences and other structures. So even if someone's got a little, excuse me, a little tiny farm that's 10 acres that they were able to bootstrap together, they're going to find themselves less inclined to invest in their own development because of the fear that larger interests are going to literally box them in. And I know that's a lot of hypothetical, but when you see it in a strategy document, you would say, I'm not sure this is the municipality for me. So this kind of goes to Councillor Oosterhoff. Without having seen the minutes of that city council meeting, did city council raise this concern and talk about how this might not jive?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't have seen that. I think we're a long ways from having those concerns, right, Craig? This is we're just bringing on our director, and though it's a valid question, John, I'm just going to just from my angle on that, I think that that's miles off. And certainly, if we want to raise it as a concern, then that's a good one. We should highlight that, but. Before we think that we're being boxed in by development, I think that's not at all an alignment that I see happening. Craig?
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. I would say, I think it's a really astute observation about the tension between this plan and maybe other plans. But actually, I would view that kind of tension as very positive. There should be dialogue, right? The Rural Advisory Committee has always been a voice for rural Kingston. What the strategy has done is formalized it and brought you to the table of the fully integrated economic development. So you're right at the table with everybody else. I'm suggesting you weren't before, but again, the plan for rural Kingston is on record. It's been supported and endorsed. Making sure that you actually share that kind of, again, if you're not from a rural community, you don't understand your example about the bees. Like that's a great example of why you have to have, buffers around. If you have bees, you need to have flowers to pollinate to get the honey. So again, I would say this is an opportunity for us, for the committees, and then certainly the working groups, to start to formulate those concerns and start to develop those scorecards and really define what rural Kingston wants.
Yeah, so my next point was I was very happy to see in the report the notion of redefining the prime agricultural zones, because historically that's just been along the classes of farmland according to the soil surveys from the middle of the previous century. And there's a lot of narrative out there, and really I'm just putting this out there, suggestion. It seems like all of the farm organizations right now, OFA, National Farmers Union, the Christian Farmers, and the National Farmland Trust, they're talking about this idea of class 4, 5, and 6 farmland still being good land, especially here in Kingston, where we've got a big goat production facility. Class 6 land is great goat pasture.
Perfect for them.
And then send them on the rocks and the trees, and they're happy as clams. Now, my final point, and I'm going to push on you a bit with this one, is so we're hiring a new manager for rural development. What is that costing? And I'm putting it in the context of, we just had a property tax increase, and Councillor Oosterhoff, can we have a property tax freebie for people with a farm business registration number and have a cost avoidance of so many thousand per year, instead of a cost addition of so many thousand per year?
So that's a good question. I'll explain how the money was approved. So the funds for this position, council approved up to $200,000 to cover the next couple of years of expenses. We haven't got to the point where as I said, we're looking to hire, so we haven't built out the full budget. But I would say the money comes from the municipal reserve fund. So that's pre-existing funds that are in reserve. So it's not coming out of the tax base. It's not increasing the tax requirements for this coming year.
That's always good.
Yes. And what I also will say is, and I don't want to be boastful because we're Canadians, we don't do that, but our group that the manager will report to me, we are very good at getting grants. In the case of the workforce development project, we got the same $200,000 in municipal reserves a couple of years ago. We've been able to leverage that with, I think we're over $4 million in grants to actually do stuff. So we keep the cost down for the taxpayer, and we get other levels of government, foundations. We'll take money from just about anybody to actually execute on the projects.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for those questions. and I appreciate the expertise and the angle. Craig, on the one thing that John brought up that is maybe we can look at too, and that I had written down, the official plan review. That's going to be really important to us as well, and that we, do the onion skin layover. We want to really be careful with that. And I know it's out there. I think it was released today. Did we see that today?
I think it was.
I think it was. I've had some input there, but not as much as I'd like. And I would think that rural advisory ought to be. Maybe we can ask for that, Mr. Clerk, if we can make a note on that, to have them speak to us as well from planning, because that's the first time I really read about the official plan review related to hamlet zoning, residential development, and land use strategy. Really, really important topics for us. And I think it does strike a nerve for the rural area. And I understand it totally. I don't feel intimidated by it because I think there's a harmonization. I think that we have people who understand the sensitivities of doing this in a rural area and maintaining, as I've made notes here, our rural values. And so that's going to be something we can talk more about. But Craig, if you know more of how we can engage, or are you waiting for the director, or is how much engagement have we had with planning on this already?
So a great question. I think the amount of engagement since it's just been released has been limited. I think the process of engagement is now the big piece. Again, I think the Rural Advisory Committee is very much in its rights to invite Paige and her team to come on out and present to us, and really use the structure of the Rural Advisory Committee as an engagement piece for rural Kingston, and let people share their views. This is the time. This is, if you wait until after it's already created, we've missed the boat. Again, having a dedicated person in this new role to actually action your concerns, to attend meetings on your behalf, to report back on those meetings, and to make sure that those engagement opportunities are arranged, certainly working in collaboration with Derek and his great team. But again, there's a lot of meetings with those things as it comes through. So you know all too well, it's critically important that we're at the table.
Yeah, no, and we'll be watching, and I am always in this. This is integral to my wheelhouse, so I really want to be part of. But I do want to assure this committee and residents that this is something that we're on top of, and so this has been evolving and moving forward. So and maybe others have that. We can bring this one up again. It's not done. So I see Allison's hands up, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Allison, for patience.
Thank you, Chairman Oosterhoff, and thanks for the great report, Mr. Desjardins. This new hire, the Manager of Rural and Community Development, I would understand, and please correct me if I'm not understanding it right, will run or organize or supervise these themed working groups that are going to be struck to tackle specific issues within this, the Rural Economic Development Strategy. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. Okay,
so I think we need to be careful and not make assumptions when it comes to, because there's quite a lot of impetus and momentum behind the fact and the importance that to the city of Kingston, it's pretty important to their overall economic development, long-term and short-term, that something happens in the rural part of the municipality and of the city itself. And one thing that I think we need to be careful on is this mention of coming up with a scorecard and identifying those areas within the rural part of Kingston, identifying those areas, i.e. that land that can be developed either for commercial or residential development. That is one themed working group that needs to have people tackling that issue specifically, because that is where you're going to have, no doubt about it, you're going to have butting heads. I mean, if we were to go out into the rural countryside of City of Kingston right now and say, hey, did you know this was happening? I don't know if there would be such a large buy-in. And I think we have to be very, very careful for the reasons that John pointed out, but for a whole host of other reasons. And it goes all the way back to land use and planning. So they need to get engaged and up to speed very, very quickly. But I just can't, I don't gloss over the fact that there could be conflicting land use issues, especially when farm organizations, their priority right now is to conserve, preserve, and save all land, farmland at all costs. That's the new motivation. So if this is going to get sold, you've got to be aware of that.
100%. And I don't know whether you were volunteering to chair that working group. I'm just kidding. But no, you're 100% right. It is going to be, but the challenge is that there's already butting heads. And we continually see that when proposals come forward. I think the solution is always dialogue. I think it's always about engaging the users, those who live in rural Kingston, in open dialogue and having them co-develop solutions. My group is a very big proponent of design thinking and design thinking methodologies. And the critical component is you have those involved in the problem actually co-create the solution. It's not a top down. I'm not going to develop the solution, that's for sure. It's going to be developed together.
Yeah, thank you for that, Craig. Excellent question, Allison. And, I think it's one that we're going to hear more from, but because I don't think where we're heading is, massive use of our farmland. I just don't think that's necessarily the context of any of this. Craig, is there, just on Allison, if you can expand on that a little bit, but the climate change input and strategic plan for that. I mean, the rural area, we never really mentioned the rural area, but the rural area is a diamond in our hand when it comes to climate change solutions and, CO sequestering. There's so much that we contribute in the rural area to our climate change initiatives. And is that going to be something that we also consider? Obviously we will. I know we will, because it's part of our strategy, but it's not really. How is it embedded in this plan?
So that's a great example of looking at things through a rural lens. And again, I think one of the critical pieces, and again, it's about turning up the microphone on this committee's concerns and interests and ambitions and how excited you are about rural Kingston. But again, making, I wouldn't say that the Climate Action Group has not thought about rural Kingston, but maybe they haven't thought about it within the context of, of the opportunities that some farmers might be able to bring forward and say, well, we're already doing this and we're contributing to climate action solutions. We need to be a part of this, and it's about being at that table.
Yeah, and so maybe, Mr. Clerk, if we could mention that Julie Salter-Keene to also ask how the calculations are made, and the contributions of the rural area are significant and often forgotten, I believe. And there are naturals, we don't even have to try, it just happens. It's the nature, so, and our farms, our farmland and the crops. So, but I think it's going to need to be a serious component to this as well. I see John's hand. I'll get you too, John. I just want to make sure we mention again the transit opportunities and discussions that we have. I really appreciated you mentioning that. We have conversations already been going on for like 2 or 3 years. And I know lots of requests. We don't have transit here tonight, but they could speak to that. But I think that there is a component that our governments are looking for too, that, provincially, I think we have some funding that had just come through regarding pilots, and conversations for the hamlets and that too. So again, complementing climate change issues, allowing residents in the rural area not to have to drive into the city, especially if we, picture the Glen Burnie one up here, there's a little more development. We could possibly have a parking lot there too, so that we can have a transit turnaround. So it's also a component of this. I want to make sure we mention that together. Yes, John, go ahead. Yes.
Sorry, maybe just I'll
ahead.
just speak to the rural transit before John makes a comment. Part of the positioning of the rural transit right now is around workforce. The government is very interested in understanding how it can facilitate access to job opportunities for all Ontarians and all Canadians. One of the opportunities is to see how we can make sure that people have an easier opportunity to get in to urban Kingston for employment. I'm sure everybody's reading headlines in local and national papers about significant shortages in staff. I hear that in manufacturing. I hear that in just about every sector. So again, if transit is a barrier, or if that can improve people's ability to get in, that is one certain way I think we're going to have to access some rural transit funding.
Very, very interesting topic, Craig. Thank you for that. I mean, if you check the arteries of driving into Kingston in the morning, it'll blow your mind. All the arteries, picture them all: east, north, east, south. Well, not south, but the number of vehicles coming into the city on a given day are incredible. And we could never make them all on transit, but it is worthy of a conversation, of a component of inclusion in there. So you go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to tie on to Allison's point there, I wanted to make two other comments in this forum, mostly for Craig's ears, but also for Donna Gillespie and the minutes. So I think that as iterations of this strategy move forward, we need to put a value on ecosystem services, which goes to also what Councillor Oosterhoff was talking about. And I'll use Kingston's tree planting strategy as an example. I think it was this time last year, they were talking about the 30,000 trees that city of Kingston is going to plant. And at the time I was thinking, well, that's great. And I asked, what does that mean in terms of coverage of tree area? I've planted 5,000 trees on my farm. A lot of them are fruit trees, but from the answer I got at that meeting, a tree is a tree. So we can value that as the Kingston climate emergency thing continues and say, we would be losing the intangible value of ecosystem services, which are extremely difficult to quantify until they're gone. And I'll use an example that I used in a paper that I used for my international trade law course in 2019, I think it was. So I was talking about free trade, and I was concerned, I was also putting in the context of farmland loss, which in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of organizations in this province, is an irreversible sort of loss. When it happens, you can't bring back topsoil. Well, you can, but it takes centuries. So in Brazil, from my using World Bank data, and from the year 1990 to 2016, Brazil's agricultural land base increased 5% as a percentage of total land area. Canada's total agricultural land decreased 0.6%. The interesting thing about that is that in Brazil, the forested area was reduced by 541,000 square kilometers, while Canada stayed the same. So when we're talking about apparently unproductive farmland in Canada being rezoned, that 10 cows on pasture, and inefficient use of farmland, which might not make a lot of economic sense when you're purely looking at the employment generated by it, the tax revenues generated by it, and the market activity generated by it, translates pretty literally into a swath of the Amazon rainforest being cut down. The World Bank is tracking that, and that's what the figures are showing. So if we're talking about rezoning apparently unproductive land in Kingston, globally, that can be the results. And I know that's pretty outside the scope of this particular forum, but it bears thinking as we continue moving forward with different iterations of this strategy.
That's a really interesting observation, and again, an ongoing discussion. It is curious, though, your comment about the fact, do we count the trees, the 5,000 trees that you planted within our tree inventory?
No.
Why does it matter whether the city plants it or you plant it? I think it just matters that we have more trees, right?
Yeah.
so again, like those are the kind of things. That's why again, having that connection into the city, we need to make sure that those are captured as part of our commitment to climate action.
Yeah, that's why are we spending tax money on planting trees when we've got that private activity happening in 83% of our city's area anyway?
That's right. That's great.
Okay, yes, Charles. Charlie, sorry. Go ahead. Nope, you're speaker still.
There we go.
There you go.
So getting to John's comment, what I find very interesting is that in that brief that you've done up, Greg, that it talks about land being used in agriculture is going down. And I see just the exact opposite. I see farms that were basically considered poor farms being tiled, being brought up to snuff. They're producing as good a crop as any of the land in the whole area. So I find it interesting that I'm seeing the exact opposite to what I see in your brief. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just the area I live in. But even when I drive across South Frontenac and the west end of Kingston, I see land improvement everywhere. Land being utilized, producing 3-4 times, who knows what amount more. So I worry about the whole base of the brief. Is it actually accurate? I don't know where the information is all coming from. That's just what I've noticed. And I wonder if, when you worry about the hamlets, I'm totally in agreement with the fact that I think most people, especially where I live, are 100% against it. But in our area, maybe up closer to Kingston, it makes sense. Hopefully not at the expense of good farmland. So that's all I've got.
A very interesting comment, Charlie, just about improving the quality of farmland as opposed to the amount of farmland. The data came from our consultants who got it from I think it was from Agriculture Canada through some surveying mapping, but that probably would have been at least 2 or 3 years old. So we can certainly go back and find out what the date is. And I apologize, I don't have that just off the top of my head, but that's an interesting observation, and it could very well be, in areas that you're seeing, it's land that's being improved for farming, whereas in other areas, perhaps more that is closer to urban Kingston, it's actually land that's being taken away from farming. But we can certainly follow up on that.
Yeah, and am I still on or am I off again?
You're on.
How do I work this thing?
You're on.
I am. I just find it interesting because I see farmers, our machinery has gotten so expensive, and we need more and more land to justify the acquisition of a capital asset like machinery. So fields are getting used that probably were never really utilized back when we had 100-acre and 50-acre farms. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about that. Going back to the very beginning of your thing, the trying to entice new farmers into business, back about, and I can't remember, it was 10 or 15 years ago, and I think it was a federal government initiative where they would guarantee up to 94% of a transaction between a young farmer and an existing older farmer. And so the government would guarantee the new applicant to the old farmer. And there was zero uptake, not one person. And the program was in place, I think, for 4 years. I don't know if Allison remembers that or not, but it was kind of a sad situation when you thought, we have all these young people that want to farm. Do they really want to farm? At what level do they want to farm? So that's something you might want to think about. I have lots of young people come and ask me, how do I get into farming? And capital, as Allison said earlier, is a huge problem. How do you do that? Well, lots of us got into farming and we just worked hard and figured it out, and you grasp whatever you can along the way to get started. And I think the same thing holds true today. You can have all the grants and initiatives you want, and I don't think it's really going to change much. I think if a person really wants to farm, John, you're farming, and you just have to keep on scratching and clawing and poking at people. Sooner or later, I think everybody's going to pay attention, and you'll make it happen one way or another. I don't know that I really need an answer on that. It's just an observation.
I think, Charlie, I think that program might have been from Farm Credit Canada. I think I remember back in yeah, I think it was back in my early days with the CFTC. You know, one of the groups we may actually invite to participate with us, or maybe come present to us, is the local Farm Credit Canada
very good
officer, and see what, again, as I said, they're the ones that led that farmer succession program, which is absolutely exceptional. In the programming that they provide and support programs. How do we engage them as an important partner? They certainly have resources that they can bring to bear.
Yeah, I got my farm through the Young Farmer program with FCC. Yep, they're good.
You know, I think a lot about how my industry has such an involvement with apprenticeships, and I've probably trained 50 to 100 young men and women to become establish a great career, and I've often thought about other industries could model some of that, and I'm sure that's what Farm Credit's intentions were. But you know, all of us have farms and businesses. I know Allison's got incredible staff there, and they're all apprenticing in some ways. You know, any workers you have, they're all, when we immerse young people in our workforce, that's how we change lives, and they get that bug, and they will work their way to a point of you know, high skill, and so that's all part of this. There's a synergy that is created when we grow our businesses, when we include our youth, and so it's there's a lot of good, and I'm really hopeful that this conversation tonight, I think there's this conversation tonight will be something that gives us more confidence. I mean, I sense some hesitancy on this committee, and so I just think that that's really important. That's why you're here, Craig, so that we can air our worries and our concerns. And because at the heart of that is we want to also protect what we value the most, and it's the quality of our lives. And I get that totally. I want that too. And I think that we're going to enhance that quality. It's about enhancing that quality and seeing what we have. And you know, finally, the city is able to look at the rural area and understand our worth and our place in the fabric of the city, and what we can contribute to many, many lives. So that's part of the component of it as well. So I don't see other hands, but there's a million questions. I hope that from here, perhaps, yes, Allison. Yeah. Thank you.
I was just saying, it's a great start, Mr. Chair, and we're certainly, what I would say is staff is excited. I'm excited. I miss the days when I used to have boots in the back of my car and got to go out and visit farms in my CFTC days. So I'm looking forward to that again. I miss getting out into the fields and speaking to farmers. So it's certainly very exciting that the implementation office is part of my group.
That's so great to hear that, Craig. I love having my boots and my shovel and getting on four-wheelers and seeing what they have to show me.
I don't think you want me working with a shovel, but I'll but anyway, I'll be out in the field.
Yeah, that's great. Allison, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Just to reiterate, because it's so important to this whole conversation about attracting new farmers, encouraging local food consumption, foster innovation in farming, and it's going to go back to and thankfully, Mr. Desjardins, you have a background in community Futures Development Corporation and that whole organization, because I want to reiterate the importance of let's get these boundaries changed so that future funding opportunities will include the rural residents within the city of Kingston. I think that's going to be very important. Maybe that needs its own working group within this new hire, because it's so important, because what we have is inequities in our own community, and that's that's not really right in our own community. So as far as you need to level the playing field for everybody, and I think that's going to be very, very important to underpinning the success of selling and supporting this rural economic development strategy. So whatever we can get done, John's motion, what do we need to do to make sure that this gets on the agenda at the next meeting and we can keep this moving forward? Because I think this has to happen in concert with what your group is trying to do. Thank you.
That's wonderful. So maybe what I can suggest to the committee and to the acting chair is I will come back at the next meeting and we can have it, at the convenience of this group with the presentation of the report that has been completed. Some highlights that I don't want to, it's a big report. And maybe invite Donna to join us, because Donna was involved and is obviously very active in this space. And that's where we'll craft the motion in advance and provide advice to you on the language and get going on that, and then approach MP Garrettson and even the neighboring, the new members of Parliament in the neighboring communities.
Well, Scott Reed is well to the north, and Shelby, there's got to be ways that we can team up. I am committed to this. We probably should have done it long ago, but now that we have a team like with Craig here and Donna, we have the personnel now to put this together. So John, thank you for bringing that up. I hope that's going to be a task before December. So we will talk about this, Craig, and we'll work with John directly on the wording and the intentions on that, and also Alison, our whole committee. Let's be sure that we do that. Thank you for that. So if there's any other questions or comments about Craig's presentation, if not, then this was for reporting only. So we will move on on our agenda, and there are no motions presented for tonight. And Mr. Clerk, can we have a note on the notices of motion that we will for December?
Yep, so I can speak to this, Mr. Chair. So Mr. Wordham sent me a copy of his motion. I will pop it up on the screen in a second, but I just want to say the procedure for the notice of motion is we'll need to get a seconder, and I'm sure that won't be hard based on the discussion. And as for the topic, Mr. Wordham gets a couple of minutes if he just wants to speak to it at all. I know he's spoken to it already. There's technically no discussion at the committee point at this, but what will happen is by him presenting it with himself as the mover and then somebody else as the seconder, it will then ensure it is placed on the agenda for the next meeting of the committee, which I believe is currently scheduled for December. So yeah, it'll be on there, it'll be on the record. So I will go ahead and get that on the screen, and John, you can speak to it if you like, and we'll get a seconder after John is done speaking to it.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I have nothing more to say. No.
You want to read it, John? You want to read it?
Sure, I'll read it to those who might be more in the
there you go. That's better.
average age group of the rural area. That was unkind. I'm sorry. So the notice of motion, and we'll of course tweak this in the several weeks between now and the next meeting, is that the Rural Advisory Committee recommend to Council that the provincial and federal levels of government be sent a formal request from the City of Kingston that the boundaries of the Community Futures Development Corporation (CFDC) of Frontenac County be expanded to include the rural zone of the City of Kingston, despite the existing boundaries along Highway 38 and Highway 401.
Okay. Well, that's a great draft. Do we have a seconder? Allison. Yes, great.
Everybody wanted to get in on that one, so we have that. So now it will go on the agenda. It'll be up there for discussion at the next meeting, and yes, there can be refinements made to it at the meeting for the final wording of the motion. So that's everything, Mr. Chair. We're all set for that for December.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John, for that, and for the committee agreeing to that. That's great stuff. So that's it for notices of motion. I don't believe there are any other business. And not that I know of any correspondence, so we'll move to the date of the next meeting. And as we've said, the next meeting of the Rural Advisory Committee is scheduled for December 15th. Don't see that on there, but that's going to be a Wednesday again. Yeah, it's a Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And so we have a motion to adjourn. And John seconds that. All in favor of adjournment? All right. Thank you very much. So once again, I want to thank Craig and Donna and everyone for their involvement in this meeting tonight. Excellent conversations and directions and learnings and excitement to move forward. So thank everybody for being here tonight, and I will call this meeting adjourned. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.